Hey, everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. I got to talk to a tremendous leader today. Leaders, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like you are in a rut? Well, the leader that I got to speak to has some great things to say about building your leadership style and what do you do when you are in a rut. So the CEO and senior consultant of BTR Impact, Jerry Dugan, joined me today. Jerry is also the host of the Beyond the Rut podcast. And yes, the title says what it's about. So Jerry talked about the leadership tent, T.E.N.T. It is an acronym. But wait till you listen to his step process for getting beyond the rut, for reducing employee turnover, for creating a trust and engagement atmosphere within your business or within your teams. You don't want to miss a second of this. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is Kenny, and I cannot wait to get to our guest today. What a tremendous background he has, and what a unique perspective he has on leadership. And some of the things he's going to talk about today will help you with your leadership credo. It'll help you with your employee turnover. I'm just going to get to him because he has such a great backstory that I want to give him plenty of time to talk about. So I want to introduce the CEO and senior consultant of BTR Impact. Jerry Dugan has joined me today. Jerry, it is so great to have you. How you doing?
Kenny, I am doing great. I've got a fresh pot of coffee. I've got one of the cups right here in my hand. I just ate breakfast. I walked my dog. He was normal-ish. He saw a dog that was too cheerful. He's like, "Get away from me!" He's like, my dog's like the old man that says, "Get off my lawn." And it's like, where did you get that from? You've got nothing to complain about. But anyway, yeah, the day is going great.
Awesome. What life is great. There could be nothing better. I want to also mention that Jerry is the host of the Beyond the Rut podcast. I'm going to give him time at the end to talk about that and where you can find that at, because it is, I want to highly recommend it. I'll just put it that way. Jerry, first, I really want to get your backstory because you have such a unique perspective in a couple of different worlds. So tell us your backstory and what's led you to do what you're doing now.
Yeah. Leadership seems to be one of those things that always found me. Probably the typical reluctant leader. Like if I could choose, I would hang in the back of the room, let other people kind of take the lead, and if it makes sense, I'll follow you. But when my parents divorced when I was younger, I found myself having to help raise my brother. So it's like got a little taste of it there. When I played on team sports, even though I was never officially the team captain, I was expected to make sure people showed up to practice and got their gear, and I'm like, but I'm not the team captain, that guy is. But you're the responsible one, you make sure they get there. And then the Army came along, and the Army really infuses the idea that everybody can be a leader. Everybody has to learn to lead. You're almost obligated to learn how to lead. And so for that, you also need to be a good follower, because you'll be in that seat of leadership and you'll want everybody else to also do the same, to follow your lead, to trust you, to bring things up if they go wrong, all those things. And coming out of an Army career, it was, a short career, 4.5 years on a 4-year enlistment. But I got to lead some small teams in a combat zone where they were spread out, 4 or 5 guys reporting to me. And I think the closest one to me was within 16 to 30 miles at any given moment. The other 4 guys were anywhere from 50 to 150 miles away from me. Oh. And so, I had to know how to equip them, give them the confidence they need, give them the empowerment needed to do their jobs as if I was there, but I'm really not. And so I learned a lot about, equipping them, serving them, making sure they're taken care of so they could go out and take care of other people. Coming out of the Army, held some leadership roles in Christian ministry and corporate training arena. where I led a small team of folks who had the responsibility of developing leaders and to help leaders specifically in healthcare take care of the people who take care of people. So that's been the career path over the years, and some weird sprinklings of like, I thought I'd be a great realtor at some point, so I'd jump in 2006. And those of us who are old enough to know what happens that year, it's the bubble burst.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for 5 years, I stubbornly tried to make it work, and I realized, wait, I did not have a dream to be a realtor. Let's get back to what I know, and that's training and developing people. My college faculty advisor saw that when I was a pre-med student with a 2.1 GPA, but tutoring people so they can get A's and B's in the classes I was failing. So he knew that I had a heart for teaching. I did not have a heart for being a physician. And if I'd listened to him sooner, well, a whole different life, and I wouldn't have met my family or had the wonderful kids I have who are now fully grown and all that. So well-rounded person here. I hope that's what I strive to
Yes.
be, and I hope that reflects in my leadership style as well.
Oh, no doubt. And I loved everything you said. And the first part of it's almost like early virtual leadership. You're leading people from afar, which a lot of leaders have challenges with, today. This may seem like a weird question, or I'm sure you've gotten this before. Tell us a little bit about the differences in leading in the military and leading in the corporate world.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference really is that expectation that succession has to happen. That you already know, based on time in rank, time in service, if Jerry Dugan dies, Sergeant Dugan dies, who's next in line to take over? And then if that guy dies, who's the next one to take over? And because of that, because of the danger of the work in the military, there's this forced there's a forced succession plan. So you know who's in charge
Yeah.
next.
Yeah.
But because of that, it also forces development. So the leader that's in charge currently isn't really going to be measured on that leader's ability to lead in the moment. They're going to be judged based on how long did everybody live and carry out the mission after you were out of the picture. And for that, you've got to delegate very intentionally. You've got to hold people responsible and hand out responsibility and let them own it. And it sounds like an oxymoron, because we think in the military it's you do what I say when I say it. When I say jump, you say how high. And that is used very rarely in the military, in my experience. What winds up happening is you're equipping everybody to take charge, because you never know. Your squad might get split in 2 to 3 parts, and now each of those parts need to be able to function on their own. And if you're not delegating and you're not growing them and making them able to take over your role as a leader, you're actually failing them. And that level of responsibility on that leader to grow their team is very heavy. And sometimes it pays off well when I carry it over into the civilian world. And sometimes people tell me I need to tone it down, that my intensity is too high. And I just reply back, I have a high expectation for leaders to serve the people they lead. And training and development is one of those big things.
Wow. Wow. You painted a great picture, and you're so right, because I think we go by what we see in the movies sometimes, that officer and a gentleman,
Yeah.
in movies like that. And you paint a very different picture, that stuff kind of happens rarely. I love that. And being able to take that, and you're not intense at all, by the way. No, I'm just
Thank
kidding.
you. I internalize a lot of it.
Let's stay on that path now, because you talked about teams. And so a bunch of middle managers listening to you will listen to you when this goes live. What's some advice on how you built teams in the past? So tell us how you built teams in the past, and what's some advice on that you give leaders today on building that really sound team and building that team culture?
Yeah. And a lot of us, when we get into our first leadership role, a lot of times, if not all the time, we got picked for that role because we're really good at our individual contributor job. So in healthcare, and a nurse leader usually is promoted into that role because he or she was a great nurse and still is a great nurse. And they're like, wow, this person's very competent. They're very skilled. Make that person a manager. Well, there are different skill sets involved now. And so there are things like managing the budget, scheduling people, handling conflict resolution, conflict management. And the thing that a lot of new managers run into is that everybody's mad and no one seems to get along, and they're acting like children. Like that lens goes into place right now, that high expectation that everybody should act just like me. It makes sense. But the
Mhm.
reality is teams are made up of individuals who are very different from each other. They may look the same, talk the same, act the same, but the reality is every single person's a different individual with a different history, with a different perspective on the world, how work should be done. And the leader's role now is to be able to respect everybody's dignity, respect all their differences. And one of my favorite words, empowerment. Empower the voices of the people around you.
Mhm.
Just because you were the one chosen to step up into that leadership role
Yeah.
does not mean you're better than everybody else. And it also doesn't mean that the weight is all on your shoulders. And I see a lot of new leaders think that they have to lay down the law. There's some expectations that need to be laid out, like here are the rules. These are the non-negotiables. Here are the things we need to talk about if an issue comes up, and then from there, just build that trust and rapport, especially with those who might be hurt that they were passed up for that promotion. That's usually a big challenge for new leaders.
Wow.
Is
Yeah.
my name was in the hat for this role. Um, how did I not get that job? And so building trust with those folks early on is very important. And if not, they have to make that choice, not the leader, but the person. Can I stick around and be supportive of this team and this leader, or do I need to remove myself from this position and go
Mhm.
elsewhere? And that's a tough conversation to have. A lot of times we want to
Mhm.
hold on to everybody and have
Yeah.
perfect attendance, and sometimes you just got to have the hard conversation of what is best for you as the team member here. Can you
Mhm.
align with the vision of the team, align with the expectations of the team, support everybody as well as the leadership, or is this not going to work for you?
Yeah.
And that's in a way serving to the person who's disgruntled as
Mhm.
well, because
Mhm.
they feel like they have no other choice but to be stuck in that rut. And you can help them see that you've got the power. You, the individual employee, have the power. You can enjoy the work here, make the most of it, and rise, or you can go the other way.
Yeah. Wow. What sound advice there, Jerry. And it's so funny because you use the example of nursing, but it's like that in almost any industry, right? Because my retail background, we typically took the best salesperson, and okay, hey, you want to lead, and I want to advance my career. But then there were a lot of times where we did that person a disfavor by not really giving them the management training. We just figured
Yeah.
that they can inspire other people to do what they did. But what you said about really now as that leader, now you've taken on that role, really looking at everybody individually is so important, and being able to do that with the lens of, hey, they're not, I can't expect them to do what I did, but maybe I can expect them to do it better, or it's my job now to train them to do that. I love that advice.
Yeah.
That is just so dead on. Um, Jerry, let me ask you what your definition is of servant leadership.
Yeah. Essentially, it's serving the needs of the team that reports to you. So a lot of times we think leadership means you've got privilege, you got the power, you got the paycheck, you've got the authority, like you're the big dog. Like everybody looks up to you, respects you, does whatever you say. In servant leadership, you almost flip that over on its head, and you don't see your role as I'm at the top of the pyramid. You see yourself as the person who goes around almost like the guy who scrapes up gum at Disney World, Walt Disney World. That it sounds like a menial
Yeah.
job, but the reality is that person has a lot of power to make or break somebody's day. A child is walking through the theme park, drops her ice cream on the ground that just got unwrapped from the store. That kid's about to have a horrible day. The parents are about to have a horrible day because the child's having a horrible day. And that person picking up gum off the ground, although, gum isn't really allowed in Walt Disney World parks, that person has the power to go into the nearest store, get a replacement ice cream, bring it up to that child and say, here you go. I'm sorry that you had a moment that wasn't so magical, but hopefully
Wow.
this restores the magic, something to that effect. Child is happy again. This ice cream came out of nowhere magically. And the mom and dad or the parents are like, wow, where did this person come from? That to me is a perfect image of servant leadership.
Yeah.
I have a team member who is having a tough time getting a project done. What can I do to help them? Oh, you're having trouble getting certain logistics open. Well, I can make a phone call, or here, make this phone call, ask for this, tell them Jerry sent you. And so you're opening doors for people and allowing them to step in. So when somebody's doing well, you put them in the spotlight, would be another example of servant leadership. If they're about to mess up, you help protect them from a career-ending move. And so that means you maybe swoop in, you ask for a delay in a presentation, you help coach them through a mistake. You let them fail, but you don't throw them under the bus for it. You help them grow from it. And so the servant leader is always looking for ways to grow the people on the team, because that individual growth means growth for the whole team, success for the whole team. Whereas somebody who's not thinking like a servant leader is always thinking about mitigation of loss. How do I protect my career from the mistakes my team will make? How do I protect the team from the mistakes an individual will make? If somebody makes a mistake, how am I going to bring the hammer down in the name of accountability? And it's so far from, servant leadership, where you're letting people make mistakes, but you're letting them grow from it. You're not killing their career because of it. You still have some non-negotiable behavioral expectations, like, there's no fighting, there's no punching, there's no sleeping on the job. There are some things that you do have to draw the line, but for the most part, if they're giving their best effort and they make a mistake, you give them the grace and the room to grow from it. One of my favorite things I did was I was in a role where I had an intern. Now, my boss had just handed me an assignment: find a coaching model for the organization. And my leader gave me 7 books, multiple articles to read. I was probably on the job for less than a month, and I had all these other things I need to learn about my job. And here I am given a project that's really going to take half of my time. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of stuff. And now I know this consultant's busy, that consultant's busy. I don't know what this person does yet. We have a meeting next week to learn about her job. And this intern walks up. She's in the last maybe 200 hours of her internship, maybe the last 100 hours. And she asks me if there's anything she could do to help me. And I remember right away, a big part of her internship is that she doesn't just get menial tasks. In fact, we're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to give her things, the intern things that help her prepare for a career in learning and development, organizational development, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And here I am with a stack of 7 books and multiple articles to read. And this person just asked me, can she do anything to help me? And I look at my books, I look at her, and she asked if she wanted me to categorize them, put them away, or something like that. I said, no. How do you feel about coaching models? She said, we're studying those right now in one of my classes.
Oh, wow. Wow.
What's your workload like right now? Because we haven't had a chance to really get to know each other. And she said, I just wrapped up another project. I have really nothing going on. I thought maybe I could help, straighten out files or something. I was like, the files will still be there. Let me pitch something to you. And I pitched her this idea. Can you help me go through all these books and articles, select your favorite coaching model that we should adopt as an organization and why? And so I was delegating to her, not just read these for me, but pick the best one for me and tell me why and defend it. She gave me 3, and I was like, well, I asked for 1, but 3 will work. We'll work from there. Turns out the assignment changed. We were supposed to develop our own. My boss insisted that I do it myself. And I told him, I'm a director. I don't have time to do one thing when I've got somebody perfectly able, capable, and available to do it. Mm-hmm. So I gave it back to her. I let her own that project till its fruition. And when she was done, within about 6 weeks, we had our own coaching model in the organization that blended 3 best practices together. And I was able to pitch this to my leader. And he was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Where'd you come up with this? And he was fine until I told him the intern came up with it. He was livid, and we spent 2 weeks arguing why that was the model we had to go with. And within a couple months after that, we're unveiling it to all the managers in the organization. Wow. And to me, that's servant leadership, because I gave her an opportunity to grow. She developed a thing that was way better than I would have expected. I let her launch it. When we unveiled it to the leadership, I didn't just take it and say, look what I came up with, like Dana Carvey from, is it Tommy Boy? Like, look, sir, look what I found. I didn't let my leader go and take credit for it. We made sure that she got credit for this and lifted her up. And now when I had to argue it, I'd put myself between her and my boss to protect her and shield her from, that. not animosity, but that pushback to a degree. And yeah, I think a good leader will do that, and I hope
Yeah.
that's what they do. You let them learn from their mistakes, but you give them
Yeah.
that opportunity to grow. And when I left that organization, um, she gave me a note. Well, I wound up hiring her, and she worked for me for 3 years.
Yeah.
Uh, and when I left, she left. She gave me a note and said thank you, and she uh, referenced that very first assignment when I had just come on board the organization. And she said that was the type of leader she strived to be. And it resonated with her. Every time she was low in her confidence, she would remember that very first assignment when she was still an intern. And that would bolster her self esteem, her confidence, and she'd get right back to what she was doing. She knew that she could give it her best effort. And if it worked, great. If not, she could trust me that I was going to help her make it even better.
Oh man, I love that story. So many aspects to it that I love. And my follow-up question was going to be, why do leaders not do servant leadership more? And you totally answered that by giving how you maneuvered, through your boss saying, wait a second, man, what I want you to do this personally. And you stood your ground and you're like, well, no, I've got, somebody. And just think about in those 6 weeks how much she developed, and then hiring her and becoming this 3-year great employee. I'm sure she's a great employee somewhere, if not still there now. But she'll probably point that back to her career starting with you having that confidence and teaching her and showing her what to do and then letting her do it. And that's just such a great example of servant leadership, and just really not succumbing to the pressure, because I think that's probably the main reason I see a lot of leaders not serving their teams a little bit more, because, oh my gosh, I had a bad month. Got to just get results. I'm just going to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
I really want to leave plenty of time because I love the leadership tent. Tent is an acronym. I want to give you plenty of time and space to talk about what that actually is and why that works so effectively. So, what is leadership tent?
Yeah. So in the military, tents are used as a headquarters. So the leaders are in there, the communications equipment is in there, the radios are in. Oh, that's communications equipment. So all the information that's around them comes pouring into this tent, gets organized, and then disseminated out of the tent. Tents are mobile. They're adaptable. So if you want the sides up to cool everything off, you can do that. If you need the sides to come down to protect you from the wind and rain, you can do that. If it's wintertime, you can add a liner, protect yourself from the cold. So tents really stood out to me because of two things. One is that the adaptability and the mobility, because in today's economy, a leader cannot be a stick in the mud. You've got to be able to pick up and move. You got to adapt to the trends. You can't just say, well, in my day we did this and it worked. Like the carrot and stick model does not work today. People have too many options in the US.
Yeah.
There's a labor shortage going on, sped up by the pandemic, but it was coming anyway. So a lot of people are freaking out about robots and AI. We've had a shortage in the workforce that has been brewing for the last 5 years and was going to hit us in about a decade, according to the Burson Institute. But it's here now. The pandemic sped everything up. So that's one thing. The mobility, the adaptability, and the shelter, like this hub of information. But it's also in response to, like, how do I package servant leadership in a way that people can remember and use on a consistent basis? And finding out from Gallup that our workforce in the U.S. is at its highest rate of voluntary turnover than we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Got its lowest rate of employee engagement, higher than normal dissatisfaction on the job. So over the last 3 years, we've seen engaged employees drop in percentage. We've seen dissatisfied employees rising, and it's showing in terms of people complaining at work, people asking for unions to come in, just people voluntarily quitting their job. And when they're asked, why are you leaving your job? It kind of boils down to two things. I did not see opportunities for growth in the organization, and I did not feel cared for. And so employees are looking for an organization that'll help them feel cared for, give them meaningful work, and that meaningful work also translates to career growth, whether that means I just get better at what I do or I have upward trajectory, either of those. When you look at what organizations are trying to do proactively, they're doing things like competitive compensation, which compensation usually satisfies for about 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
then after that, it's back to where you were. So you got to fix the underlying root cause. Organizations are looking at wellness programs. People are in the office 8 to 12 hours a day, more so than with their families. So how do we make it worth their while to be away from their families, especially when we're calling them back in from remote work?
Mm-hmm.
And then the opportunities for growth. Either I've got untapped skills or I'd like to stretch in my capabilities, but I don't see the opportunities in the organization, or I'm not offered the opportunities in the organization. So that's where employees are coming from. Organizations are looking at pay, wellness, and career progression or career pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And these things take time to research, design, and implement. Well,
Mm-hmm.
while that's happening, you're losing people anyway.
Yeah.
And so I talked with a lot of managers, asking them, what's your biggest frustration around employee engagement and voluntary turnover? And they said, I feel like compensation's great, but it's never enough. People are not happy at the amount, or that it only went to a certain group of employees at the organization. Where's my cut kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They love the career pathway stuff, but we're looking at 6 months to a year before it's rolled out. We have these formal training programs, but they're limited in space and frequency of opportunity when they're deployed. So I'm just wondering, as a manager in the middle, what can I do now that will make my employees feel cared for and give them the opportunity for growth? And then that's where the T.E.N.T framework comes in. So the first letter, T, stands for trust building. So a leader who's a servant leader and wants to help people feel cared for has to be trustworthy to start off. And that's how you build trust. And so some of the things that I teach around trust building, Simon Sinek says, start with why. And for me, as a leader, having a leadership credo is one of the most foundational things that a leader should have. Like my ability to delegate a project to an intern that my boss of 1 month was expecting me to do myself went back to what is my credo. I'm a people-centered servant leader who respects the dignity of every person and feels that the individual success of a person ties into the organizational success of the team. Therefore, my leadership style is inclusive, collaborative, and provides opportunities for growth. And as a result, my employees can expect an environment where they have opportunities for growth in their career, in their skill sets. They have the room to make mistakes and learn from them, and they have a voice in my team. And that is my credo. Paraphrased. That's paraphrased. It's 3 sentences long.
Wow.
But because of that, I was able to look at my intern and say, this is yours. You own this. I'm right here with you. Don't worry if you've never done this before. I have, but you've got this. This is yours.
Yeah.
She owned it. And so that's the first thing. Leadership credo. Other things that help build trust. So there's that. Self-awareness. What's my personality style? What are my emotional triggers? I have them. And then HALT, for self-management. HALT, HALT. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And then from there, what do I do intentionally to get to know my people as people first? Sometimes as a leader, we think of our employees as a cog in the wheel, as an expense. I just need to worry about not having overtime. But the reality is, your people are people. They have lives outside of the office, outside of the workplace. So how do you build them up? So that's trust building. The second letter is empowering, E. And 2 ways to empower your employees: empower their voice, empower their actions. You're sharing your power as a leader with your team members. So empowering your voice, one of the things I love to talk about and teach is rounding with their employees. So, hotel managers, really good hotels, they do this all the time. They just walk around and talk to people. At Walt Disney World, a friend of mine, Dan Cockrell, told me that he used to run Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. And he said that his executive assistant would kick him out of the office every day, rain or shine, to go meet 3 or 4 cast members and have a conversation with them. And if it was a rainy day and he wanted to stay inside, she would hand him an umbrella and say, for that, you will now go out here to Tomorrowland where there is no cover and you'll talk to 3 people. He's like, okay, got it. And he would go. And she would expect. So his executive assistant was expecting some feedback from him to prove that he really did go out there and meet people. And so from doing that, he would learn people's names, where they're from, why they chose Walt Disney World to work there. What do they think is working really well? What is not working well? What ideas do they have to make improvements in the workflow? Who do they want to recognize on their team who's been doing a great job? So empowering that voice and reporting back to everybody, hey, I've been listening to you for the last 2 weeks. Here's my stoplight report. Here are the things that I've accomplished and done and changed because of your feedback, green light. Here are the things I'm still working on, yellow light. And here are the things that are either a no or a not right now, and here's why, red light.
Sure.
So you're communicating back to your employees. Oh, and by the way, let me recognize Kenny for a great job he's doing, because he picked up that somebody had dropped an ice cream, went out and got it, and came over, and then went right back to what he was doing. And it saved other people from having to do that. It made an improvement. It improved safety, whatever it was. So that's rounding with your people.
Awesome.
To empower actions, delegation, and not just actions like, hey, this is yours, go do it, but you also clarify for them, what is your level of decision making in this area of responsibility? And so I cover 4 levels of decision making: carry, crawl, walk, run. We won't go into that here because I think we're running out of time. N on T.E.N.T stands for navigating for success. So helping your employees set goals that help them grow, but also help the organization, providing them with feedback in a timely manner that helps build them up, that has clarity to it, in the heart of helping that individual win, not just to beat them up, but to help them win and improve from a situation, or to reinforce something they're doing right. So we often think feedback is only when you do something wrong. Give feedback when they're doing the thing you want them to do, because they're going to want to do more of it. Coaching them for success. So again, not coaching them because they did something wrong, but coaching them to help them achieve one of their goals. Maybe they want to go back to school to get a degree so they get a promotion, which might be a promotion out of your team. Help them do that, because it does a couple of things. One, they'll remember you for that, and they'll pay that back or forward in some way, shape, or form. That becomes part of your leadership legacy. But then also, if they move on to another job in another team or organization, that freed up a spot for somebody else on your team to come in and grow into that role. So it now opens up more room for growth.
No doubt.
And so that's there. And then the mentoring, maybe somebody wants the job you've got. Have the backbone to be okay with somebody wanting to replace you.
Yeah,
because,
exactly.
Yeah. It's like somebody said, how do you have job security? It's like, well, I made myself irreplaceable. It's like, well, how come you've never been, promoted? I made myself irreplaceable. And so if you want to move up the ladder as well, you got to make yourself replaceable. So it's
Absolutely.
like, in the military, how does a sergeant go from being a sergeant to like a squad leader to a platoon sergeant? Other than having the points and being selected for the position, they made themselves replaceable at the squad level. And they've been doing that the whole time. And same in the civilian world. If you want to be moved up from a manager role into a director role, and have a clean break and do the director role, you got to make yourself replaceable.
No doubt. No doubt.
And so mentoring the people underneath you. And then the last T is thriving together. And I talked about like the drop in engagement, the rise in disengagement, and a group called Zippia did some surveys, and they found out that it was something like 29% of the people they surveyed said that they had not been complimented at work in over a year.
Wow. My God.
And if Gallup were to talk to the same people, which category do you think they would be in? Engaged, slightly engaged, or disengaged?
Oh, disengaged.
Yeah, most likely be in the disengaged category. It'd be the people talking trash about your company, poo-pooing every project idea, every decision. That's if they're vocal. If they quietly quit, they're just doing the bare minimum. They show up, they clock in, they do enough to not get fired, and they go home, really not contributing a whole lot while they're looking for a new job on the clock. So thriving together is all about recognize your people early, recognize them often, recognize them in a genuine way. And then if you really do your job of getting to know your people as people, you get to know what makes them tick. How do they like to be recognized? Some people want the public recognition. Give me praise in front of the team so they know I'm doing a great job. Give me praise personally, even if it's not in front of an audience. I like to hear those words of affirmation. For some people, I want a pizza party. Even if you just take me to lunch or bring me a coffee, I want some sort of tangible, edible treat. Some people it's tickets. Some people it's just, I would like some extra time to go home. So if you can give me an extra 2 hours on the clock, or PTO, or just let me go home. Let me clock out and go home.
Mm,
Honor my PTO request that's coming up, which I think we should do anyway, regardless. Like, don't make that a reward.
right.
Uh, and celebrate all the milestones. If I'm leading a project for the first time, celebrate that. Hey, so and so just led the first meeting ever in this organization. It was very structured, organized. It started on time, finished on time, got a lot of feedback, and he's doing the follow-up right now. Or hey, so and so just finished a project and it's launching tomorrow. We're gonna have a big launch party, and this is what we're gonna do, and we're all hands on deck, and we're gonna celebrate the project and this person for leading it. And even if somebody, while you're rounding tells you, Kenny's been doing a great job, and you have your next team meeting, hey, I just want to let you know that Olivia said that Kenny's doing a great job, and here's why. And does anybody else have anything they want to say to praise somebody else on the team? And then that popcorn, boom, 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 and you just build that up.
Yeah.
Thrive together, because everybody's spending so much of their day. My mentor, David Wagner, when I worked at Christus Spawn Health System, he, I think, is leading an HCA hospital right now. His voluntary turnover rate for RNs in the United States at the time we're recording this is around 20%.
Mm.
Within 12 months, 1 out of 5 nurses leaves.
Wow.
This guy is applying everything that, he taught me. So T.E.N.T kind of ties back to David in some way. But David shared with me his RN turnover rate right now, voluntary turnover rate, is at like 5.4%.
Wow.
It's like a quarter of what the national average
What the
is.
national average is. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I almost quit my business and asked him if he had a job opening.
Yeah.
I didn't learn from you more, David. He laughed. I was like, you think I'm joking, but seriously, I'm gonna watch your job board from now on.
Yeah.
So that's T.E.N.T. Trust building, empowering, navigating, thriving together. And if you do those 4 things, stake out those 4 first. That's the fastest way to pitch a tent, by the way, is to stake out the corners first. And so if you stick that in the ground, it doesn't matter what else you do. As long as you're following those 4 principles, you're going to build people up and drive success in your team.
Jerry, that was just so outstanding. It's so funny because certainly I saw it and looked at it. Hearing you talk through it, it made so much more sense to me. And it's such a blueprint for employee retention. It really is. If you do all those things, it's really simple. And you've got to, I'm sure you have more than that one example, but and we tend to not worry about that in retail world, right? We just think that, people are going to come and go anyway. No, that doesn't need to be the case. Do these things, and you never know who's gonna, because they're in school to do something else, that they say, you know what, I really like what I'm doing here. I'm going to stay here because also I like the leader who's doing XYZ with me, who's doing T.E.N.T actually with me. I'm not going to add anything else, man. You have been amazing. You're an amazing leader, and I love that you are passing it on and giving it forward to other leaders. And so, how can people get in touch with you? Listen to your podcast. I think you may have a book coming soon. I hope.
Oh yeah, a book is out already, but it's based on the podcast. So the podcast is Beyond the Rut, and it's about sharing encouraging stories of people who felt stuck in life. And what did they do to have their aha moment, recognize the rut they're in, understand where they wanted to go, and then take action to get there. So it's their stories of getting unstuck and living the life they dreamed of living. And that can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on the website beyondtherut.com. And there's a book by the same name that is really the manifesto of the show after 8 years. The show's been around for about, this is the 8th year. So August of 2023 will be 8 years that this show's been around. Over 300 episodes when I wrote the book. It's called Beyond the Rut, Create a Life Worth Living in Your Faith, Family, and Career. So have your cake, eat it too. Have the success you want in life, in your career, but not at the expense of your faith or your family in the process. And that's available on Amazon as an ebook, as a paperback, and as an Audible. But if you buy one of the print versions, the audiobook is available for free.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you're in a leadership role or you work for an organization that develops leaders and you're looking for a keynote speaker or a workshop, set up a free virtual call with me, and you can go to btrimpact.com/virtual coffee. and we'll just chat for 15 minutes, see what you're working on, and from there decide if a strategy call makes sense for you, and create some goals. So
Awesome. Make sure all of that is in the show notes, and I have to now make sure I order your book. Uh,
awesome.
yeah, and we didn't even scratch the surface on that, because one of the other things that Jerry really emphasizes is all the things that he talked about, also work in life, and he doesn't want. I'll say this real quick. I love the New York Mets, and Francisco Lindor is a very good player. He's having a little bit of a rough season, but we sometimes lift up. Him and his wife had a baby girl, and he wound up showing up at the game to play, that same day. Come on, man. You know what I mean? That's like a badge of honor almost, and it shouldn't be. And you talk about a lot of just the opposite. It's okay to work hard and do all those things, but you can't sacrifice your faith and your family and those things in life that you're going to be remembered for anyway. So that's another reason to listen to Jerry's podcast, as well as grab his book and work with him. So we'll make sure all that is in the show notes. Jerry, I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time and with your thoughts, and being so vulnerable with me today. I so appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you again, because I feel like I just scratched the surface.
Thank you so much, Kenny, and thanks for helping me get this message out there to us middle managers and above.
Absolutely. Well, folks, we're going to leave it there. This has been Kenny and Jerry. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.